preparation for the United Nations Association's test of English.
This time, we will proceed with questions and answers that assume an actual interview test. Dr. Cape has prepared 14 questions and answers, so let's take a look at them in order. As you know, the actual exam will be based on the interview sheet you filled out in advance. Also, there are interviewers who ask questions that have nothing to do with the interview sheet, so it can be said that this is the highest level of difficulty.
Let's quickly take a look at the list of 14 questions.
1. How are you today? 2. Why are you taking this examination? 3. How long have you studied for this examination? 4. What have you done to prepare yourself for this examination? 5. How have you improved your communication skills in English? 6. How have you accumulated your knowledge on the United Nations? 7. What do you think of the year 2020 for the United Nations?
8. Do you know the message of US President Trump delivered at the UN General Assembly this year? 9. What do you think of the precarious transition period in the US presidency? 10. How do you compare between the Trump administration and the Biden administration? 11. Do you foresee any difficulties that the Biden administration is likely to confront? 12. How about the foreign policy outlook of the Biden administration? 13. What do you think Japanese Prime Minister Suga's foreign policy? 14. In your view, what will be major societal issues of Japan in 2021?
How are you today?
I am fine, thank you, although I am very nervous today because of this oral examination. In fact, I did not sleep well last night as I had to travel to Tokyo for this examination from my hometown earlier this morning. Let us see how well I will survive through this difficult examination.
Why are you taking this examination?
I am taking this examination as I have always been interested in English, as well as the activities of the United Nations. My mother has long been active in UNICEF fundraising activities since I was a small child, which has also raised my interests to the young.
How long have you studied for this examination?
As you know, this examination is given twice a year, in May and October. At the beginning of this year, I decided to take the May examination, but soon later found that the examination would be cancelled because of the pandemic. As a result, I postponed my examination schedule until October. But at least I had a longer preparatory period for the examination, with several additional months.
What have you done to prepare yourself for this examination?
In addition to learning about many basic facts of the UN, I have tried to be familiar with major, contemporary international issues. This year, the pandemic crisis has been the single most significant issue in virtually all societies of the world. So, I have collected much information on the policy debate on public health, most of all, that of Japan, and later that of different countries and regions. In this regard, this year is quite different from other years, with one single issue, that is the COVID-19 pandemic, having overwhelmingly been affecting everywhere.
How have you improved your communication skills in English?
Since I have experienced studying abroad, I am fairly conversant in English. I have also many English-speaking friends around the world, and occasional contacts with them, in fact many of them, on a daily basis, have helped me sustain my communicative skills. I have tried to maximize my exposure to the English language. I have read English newspaper articles as much as possible on a daily basis. I have also watched English TV programs, in order to improve oral communication. I have often visited various documentary programs of international affairs available on the internet.
How have you accumulated your knowledge on the United Nations?
First of all, I have read the officially recommended textbook, New Today's Guide to the United Nations. Then, I have read a few additional books on the UN, in Japanese and English, in order to expand my knowledge on the organization. The web pages of the UN, its organs and specialized agencies have all been important sources of newest information on important international events. I have also frequently visited the homepage of the Japanese government, particularly that of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, so as to become better informed of our country's foreign policy.
What do you think of the year 2020 for the United Nations?
I think that the year 2020 has been a very challenging year for the United Nations. Since 2017, President Trump has been actively pursuing the foreign policy which is hostile towards multilateral diplomacy of the UN. He has been preoccupied with such political acts, under the banner of America First, that would only raise his popularity among domestic constituents. And the pandemic crisis has further challenged the utility of the organization as an august forum for multilateral diplomacy. It is feared that the pandemic may have created the notion among national political leaders that cumbersome UN diplomacy could be greatly simplified by video conferences.
Do you know the message of US President Trump delivered at the UN General Assembly this year?
Yes, I understand the general thrust of President Trump's speech, which was a short pre-recorded statement. He was mostly critical towards the international state of affairs, attacking China for unleashing the China virus upon the world. Basically repeating last year's message, President Trump denounced the Paris Climate Change Agreement and the Iran nuclear deal. He even urged other countries to emulate his America First framework as the basic policy framework.
What do you think of the precarious transition period in the US presidency? President Trump has prioritized the electoral victory as the ultimate objective in his policy agenda for 2020, and now he is an extreme sore loser. Indeed, the present confusion in American politics shows how its political system, particularly its presidential electoral system, could be abused. This malfunctioning transition period has kept the country rather unprepared to cope with serious international security issues. Obviously, the Trump administration, whose official mandate lasts only until January 19, 2021, should refrain from undertaking any drastic actions, domestically and internationally, that would induce devastating spillover effects on the American society in the post-Trump era.
How do you compare between the Trump administration and the Biden administration?
The Trump administration has been defensive, having acted in an anti-globalist fashion, certainly unwilling to compromise in reaching agreements with other international political leaders. On the other hand, the Biden administration is likely to be more proactive, willing to compromise if necessary by refraining from propagating anti-globalist actions. The Biden administration will have to undo many of the policy actions undertaken in the previous administration, and it seems that this process could be time-consuming, likely causing strong backlash from the Trump supporters. In any case, the Biden administration will be willing to go back to the position of the Obama administration with regard to specific foreign policy actions.
Do you foresee any difficulties that the Biden administration is likely to confront?
Yes, I sense that the new administration will face many different and difficult issues. Some are more of his personal matters, while others are political in nature. At the personal level, the president will have to cope with many negative images that have been propagated by his political opponents, particularly the Trump camp. In this regard, his mental and physical health conditions due to his advanced aging will haunt the presidential reputation. Mainstream media in the U.S. acted rather leniently to the October surprise of the Hunter Biden scandal. However, such leniency may not last very long once his presidential term begins next January. It is not clear at this moment how quickly COVID-19 vaccines will be made available to the general public. In the worst-case scenario in this regard could be as follows: the Biden administration will inaugurate at the time when the American society has been deeply polarized into two contending camps. Toward the new administration, and the pandemic crisis has dropped the country's economic performance almost like a freefall bungee jumper. The Biden administration will face the international pressure to return to multilateralism. But it would be difficult to focus on international issues when domestic issues command the administration's immediate attention of the new administration. The prolonging political problems in the Biden administration's first term would likely invite the challenging electoral prospect for the second term.
How about the foreign policy outlook of the Biden administration?
It seems to take some time for the new administration to understand the magnitude of the damages the previous administration has brought forth to the country's image abroad. All in all, The international community is aware that the Biden administration will be much more accessible for consultation to build multilateral cooperation. While the heads of many countries and governments have expressed their willingness to cooperate with the new administration, there are still some countries whose heads have kept themselves silent.
What do you think Japanese Prime Minister Suga's foreign policy? I do not think the Suga administration is not particularly active in foreign policy making. Mr. Suga has long been the cabinet secretary under the Abe administration. While supposedly being familiar with Mr. Abe's foreign policy, Mr. Suga is not known as a geopolitical strategist of Japan's foreign policy. After all, Mr. Suga is an old-fashioned politician, skillful in political horse trading among factional groups within the Liberal Political Party, LDP. Unlike Mr. Abe, who managed to establish a close personal relationship with President Trump, the incumbent will not be able to establish a similar relationship with President Biden.
In your view, what will be major societal issues of Japan in 2021?
As seen in many other countries, the resolution of the pandemic crisis, together with many of its spin-off effects, most importantly, economic recession, will continue to be the single most serious issue to Japan. Even if the pandemic crisis were to be brought under control in a single country, the country would remain potentially vulnerable as long as the health hazard survives somewhere in the world. The issue of vulnerability is very pertinent with regard to the wisdom of holding the Olympic Games in July 2021. The International Olympic Committee has announced the organization's willingness to sponsor the vaccines to the athletes coming to Japan. But it should be reminded that the Olympic Games will likely attract a much larger number of additional visitors.
After all, the topic of COVID-19 and the US presidential election dominated the news this year. Meanwhile, AI and robot technology are steadily evolving remarkably. It seems that the global depression is about to come, but I hope the latest technology will be a breakthrough in reducing the damage of the depression.
Thank you for watching. Have a good one. Cheers.